Hello and welcome to Improving How You Give Feedback. This is part of our Future of Work free webinars. We do one a month. My name is Danette Fenton-Menzies and I'm the Director of Learning at Magical Learning. I hope you enjoy today's webinar and please feel free to email us at learn@magicallearning.com if you have any suggestions for topics that you'd like us to do a webinar on. So what we're going to cover in this webinar is why people don't like giving feedback and why it is so important that you develop your ability to give feedback. So the key topics we're going to cover today are why people don't like giving feedback, what constitutes good feedback, and actually give you 3 techniques that will help improve your feedback skills. Now, I love quotes. And I particularly love this one by John Windus, which is feedback is probably the most cost-effective performance tool available. And I so agree with that because the more we give feedback, the better people are able to perform. Without feedback, people are in a vacuum. And in fact, once I was teaching a course on giving and receiving feedback, and one of my participants had a manager where she'd worked with them for 3 years and not once during those 3 years had the manager provided feedback. And I said to them, wow, how did you manage that? And they said, well, I just assumed that no feedback meant that I was doing okay. Now that's not really helpful and it certainly doesn't help a person improve. So the more we can give good feedback, the better we enable our people to perform better. Now, something I found incredible is that there was a poll done by Interact, and what they found is that 69% of managers were uncomfortable with simply communicating with their employees, not even talking about giving feedback. Now, how are people meant to get better unless we're able to communicate and communicate honestly with good intentions to help improve what our employees are doing? So I found that a startling statistic, and I'm sure you do too. And it is definitely one of the reasons why, if you want to be a great supervisor or manager or leader, it is so important to work on your feedback skills. Now, one of the reasons we see that people avoid giving feedback is because often it will trigger a threat reaction in potentially the person who's receiving the feedback, and generally they will feel a bit threatened. And also it can trigger that same reaction in the person who's actually giving the feedback because they're nervous about the response that they might get. So what happens when our brain detects threat is it either does a fight, a flight, freeze, or a flock approach. So when we see people who go to the fight end of the spectrum, they will tend to get quite aggressive when they feel threatened. So in a feedback situation, that person might go on the defensive and potentially start yelling. The worst I ever heard was where the person who gave the feedback, they were giving the feedback to a person and all of a sudden the person physically launched themselves across the desk and started hitting the person who'd given feedback. Now that's an extreme end of the fight response. Some people will go more to the flight response, and that is that they'll go very quiet. They may not say anything in relation to the feedback that they're being given. Some people will just look like a startled deer in the headlights where they're actually, oh my goodness, and they're not able to respond at all. The flock response tends to happen after the feedback is given, where the person, and it might be the person who's giving the feedback, it could also be the person who's receiving the feedback, will go and talk to others. So they'll flock with others and talk and process the feedback. Now, all of these, one of the things you need to understand is if either party is in that threat reaction mode, their brain is not going to be fully open to being able to hear the feedback that's being given. So it is so important for when we're giving feedback to be nice and calm, because if we're giving the feedback and we're calm, it does assist the other person to be less likely to be triggered by that threat reaction. And we'll talk a little bit later on about how we can stay calm during a conversation, which sometimes we might see as a little bit difficult. So one of the reasons, and mostly why people tend to avoid giving feedback, is that at work often you'll have, I could do this or this, and there's generally a right or a wrong answer. However, when we're giving feedback, people's reaction is not necessarily easy to predict. And because of this, people tend to want to avoid something that they can't necessarily control the reaction of the others. The problem is, as I said a little bit earlier, if we don't give feedback, then the other person is not generally able to improve their performance, because feedback allows a person to get some information and then to adjust their behaviours in order to be able to improve what they do. So it is a really critical skill to learn, and it is something that if it feels uncomfortable, recognise that you're growing and still make sure that you undertake giving regular feedback. Equally, you should seek regular feedback as well. So one of the things across the world that I see is that the best performers in the world have coaches. Now, those coaches aren't necessarily better at particular skills. For example, if you think of Roger Federer, the tennis player, his coach is not a better tennis player than him, and his coach is able to give him feedback so that Roger Federer stays at the top of his game. So when you're giving feedback, it should focus on what the employee needs to keep doing. So what is it that they're already doing particularly well? What is it that they need to start doing? So perhaps behaviours, perhaps skills that they need to learn in order to improve their performance. And finally, is there anything that they need to stop doing? So each day I use this for myself. So I ask myself, what can I keep doing? What do I need to start doing today? And what do I need to stop doing? And as supervisors, managers and leaders, we should be doing this for ourselves, and we should also be encouraging these questions for our staff as well. And certainly when we give feedback to them, following those three categories can help you give really good feedback for your people. I love this. Speak when you're angry and you will make the best speech you will ever regret. So it is very important to stay very calm when you are giving feedback, and please make sure that you don't give feedback when you are angry. You will be in the fight response generally, and that will mean that the other person will also feel threatened, and no good is likely to come out of that space. Make sure that you do get yourself to that calm, centered space before you undertake giving feedback. What constitutes good feedback? If we do it well, it creates trust between you and the other person. Feedback needs to be timely. It's no use saying to a person, when you did that 5 months ago, it had this impact, because more than likely that person doesn't remember that incident if it was 5 months ago. One of the things that we also need to practice a lot more than we probably usually do is listen more. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Another way to make feedback much more powerful is for us to ask questions and then allow the person to actually process the question and also their strategies on how they could move forward. There's been a lot of research which shows that feedback is not something that most people like. And in fact, a far more effective technique for getting people to change is actually to ask questions and allow them the time to reflect. And once they've done that, they'll come up with their own answers, which means that they will own those answers and own the new behaviours that they need to undertake. So simply taking time to ask good reflective questions of your staff can help that person grow and become better at what they do. Please also note that it is important to recognise the effort that they have been putting in. We generally hear far more negative things at work about what we're not doing, and it is quite rare that workplaces actually recognise what people are doing and the effort that people are putting in. So taking that time to recognise that effort will relax the person, and again, it will make them feel like they're part of the conversation and you're not just focusing on what they're not doing correctly. Please make sure that you address the areas that they do need to improve on, and we're going to cover that very shortly as well, and be really clear and specific. I know in some workplaces, when one person in the team is not doing something, where the manager perhaps doesn't like giving direct feedback, they'll hold a team meeting and they'll vaguely raise the issue. They won't say it's one person. They'll say, you know, the team needs to stop doing this. And every other team member's going, oh, when did I do that? And their brain goes off trying to work out when they did that. And often the person who is actually doing that behaviour is completely oblivious to the fact that that comment was pointed at them rather than the rest of the team. So make sure that you give that one-on-one rather than giving it to the team as a whole, unless the team as a whole really does need to work on that particular attribute or behaviour. Some of the things you can do for yourself first, and this is about planning before you actually go in to give the feedback, so that preparation stage, is get to know yourself. So as a manager, a supervisor, or a leader, that self-awareness helps us understand how we approach feedback and what our likely reactions are going to be. It's really important to have thought about what are the main points that you need to cover in that conversation, and set an intention before you actually go in to the conversation. One quality that I love, and I see this in the great supervisors, managers and leaders, is that they're curious. So they take the time to understand where the other person is coming from, versus those that think they know why the person is doing what they're doing and they assume. And you all probably know the phrase, when we assume, it makes an ass of you and also me. So it is really important to listen to the other person first and understand their perceptions. And that comes from Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talked about seeking first to understand before being understood. Make sure that you manage your emotions. So if you're feeling angry or frustrated, you need to get yourself to a space where you are calm so that you can create that safety in the conversation with the other person. Recognize too that silence is actually a good tool. So if you ask a question and the person goes silent while they're processing, please don't jump in and ask another question or make comments, because you interrupt their ability to process what you've already asked. So when you ask a question, then take the time to give them that space through a bit of silence. Obviously, don't make it really uncomfortable, and give them the time to process. By doing the second dot point, which is understanding what your main points are, that can help you ensure the consistency of your message, and make sure that you focus on the fact that this is all about continuous improvement. And with continuous improvement, it means little changes over time. And that's one of the reasons that we do regular feedback, to enable the person and the team to continuously improve. Now, when we are dealing with giving feedback, it's really important to be specific about the attributes and behaviours. So, for example, an attribute could be that work isn't timely. So how is that displayed? Well, they consistently miss deadlines, or they submit their work late. Well, they would do both, wouldn't they? Another attribute is that they are producing poor quality work. Well, what does that mean? That they're rushed, the documents are not spell checked, and that looks, like poor quality. The other one is person could be hard to work with. So that's their attribute. How does that show up in their behaviours? They could be surly, they could be moody, when they're in a bad mood, they could slam down the phone. So by being able to identify what are the attributes and also the behaviours, you're able to give the person specific feedback about how those attributes show up in their behaviour. So when we want to give that feedback, we could say, okay, well, I need you to be more timely. A better way of saying that is to be more specific. So what I need from you is that you submit everything when it is due or before it is due. We could also say, instead of producing better quality work, I need you to proofread and spell check your work before submitting it. And the attitude one that we spoke about on the previous slide, you need to check in with yourself before you come to work. Try focusing on being grateful and smiling more. Now, you notice with those be more specific column that allows the person to take away tangible actions that they can do, and they know the outcome that you are looking for. So this assists them to be able to measure whether they are improving or whether they need some more support. Now, one of the things I see a lot, and people think they're being really efficient when they listen, but they're not really listening. So I call this fake listening. When we are busy, we sometimes think that, particularly if we think we know why the person is not performing, then we won't take the time to actually listen to them. We'll pretend to listen to them, hoping that they think we've heard them and that they'll be able to solve their issue. And as I said, while it is efficient because it's quick, it is not effective. The problem is the person won't feel heard, they won't feel listened to, and they are likely to stay stuck because you haven't been fully listening to them. When we fully are present with our people, we create a safe space where they feel like they are part of the team, and they are far more likely to commit to taking new actions to change their behaviour. So whatever you do, make sure that when you are sitting doing the feedback conversation, that you take that time to get fully present with the person. And in fact, I've heard from someone that the greatest present we can give is our presence, because that creates an amazing space for the two of us to connect and to be able to understand each other much better. So what does real listening look like? It means understanding your person enough to understand whether they're more visual, more auditory, more tactile, more logical, and then using their communication preferences in order to be able to get the message across. For a visual person, I would say, when I'm watching you, these are some of the things that I see in what you do. And notice there I used watching and see, which are visual terms. That will make the person feel like we're on the same page. Makes it much, much easier to give feedback if you understand their communication preferences. And we will cover that on another webinar later on. As I said in the previous slide, paying full attention, so just being fully present. That means no devices in the room. So whatever you do, do not bring your mobile phone to the conversation. Leave it somewhere else. Even if you have your mobile phone and it's turned upside down on the desk, the message that the other person gets is that they're not as important as your device. So please make sure that no devices in that conversation. Your role is to be curious. So what is going on for them? What is it that they are experiencing, and what are their struggles? Make sure that you repeat back what it is that you've heard from them so that you do clarify that you have heard them. And our role is to ask questions so that we understand where they're coming from. Now, if you find that you are a person who likes to perhaps interrupt an answer for a person, in coaching we have this great technique called WAIT. And WAIT stands for, why am I talking? So why am I talking? So put a sign up, perhaps behind where the person is sitting, and have weight, and remind yourself to pause, let them fully have their say before you interrupt. Now, 3 techniques that I want to share, and I've actually got a bonus two, in fact. So the first one is the GROW model, and this is a coaching model. GROW stands for goal, reality, obstacles and options, so it's a double O there, and way forward. An example is the goal is the end point, so where that person needs to be, where they want to be. The reality, once we've identified where is it that they need to be, so what is it they need to change in terms of their behaviour, then we look at reality, and reality is the current reality that is happening at the moment. So this is where we can give specific examples of where they may not be performing to the level that we're expecting of them. Then we look at the obstacles that they're facing. So what are the things that are stopping them from being able to perform to the level that we need them to? Is it that we're not giving them enough guidance? Do they need some more training because their skills aren't up to speed? Is it that there's a communication issue? Is it that they're relying on someone else perhaps who's not providing the information in a timely manner? So we explore what are those obstacles. Then together we work out, well, what are the options for them to move forward to be able to achieve the goal that they're after? A great question here that I often ask when I'm coaching people is, when they seem a little bit stuck, what else? And what else? And what else? So that allows them to develop a number of options. Then we work out which of the options is the most appropriate for the way forward in order to solve and get to that goal that they're after. It's a great model. I use it a lot in coaching. If you need more information on it, then I would encourage you, just Google GROW model and you'll find great information around the goal model. Another approach is to ask, tell and ask. So ask what it is that they know about what they're doing at the moment, and also what is it that they want to know about that particular task that perhaps they're not quite getting at the moment. Then we would speak to them. So the word tell I don't necessarily like, but we would talk to them and share with them what they want to know. And then we would ask, again, if they understand, and is there anything else that they need to know before they go and apply the new behaviour or the new techniques that they need to improve on the task that they're working on. Because a lot of people don't like giving feedback, there's one technique I've found which whenever I teach it, everyone loves and everyone gets excited. And this is the feed forward technique. This was originally created by Marshall Goldsmith, and it's about, in a group, or you could even do it as individuals, you identify what is that attribute that you need to change or that behaviour that you need to change or learn more about. And you go around your team and you ask them. And so you say, I need help improving my public speaking skills. And the other person will give you 2 or 3 things that have worked for them or ideas that can help you moving forward. There's no comments in the feed forward conversation about previous behaviour. It's all about, I tried this and this helped me improve my public speaking, or I tried this, or I've noticed that people who did do this are much better public speakers. You can do this with your entire team. So you can get your entire team to pick one thing that they need to work on in order to improve what they do, and then just get them to go round, and one person says, this is what I need, and they will pair up with another person who says, well, here's some things that might help. At the end of that quick discussion, the person who receives the feed forward information says thank you and moves on to another person. If you do this with your team, what you'll notice is they all get excited and the energy in the room is amazing. So I absolutely would encourage you to use the feed forward approach. 2 bonus techniques. One comes from Dan Pink, and he does a video blog, and he did one on 19 words. This came from apparently a book called The Culture Code, which was written by Daniel Coyle. And they found that when we use these specific 19 words, it enables people to move forward in a really positive way. So the 19 words are, I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know you can reach them. Now, isn't that lovely languaging? If you are interested, we can definitely send you the link to that. If you want, you can just Google Dan Pink 19 words and you will come up with that video blog. Now, another technique that I learned in a different course is called carefrontation, and it's by a woman called Lisa Nichols. And it starts like this. What I appreciate about you is, and you might give them one or two things. What I respect about you is, and you could use the word admire, any of those, and you would generally give two statements and give genuine examples of where you admire, respect what they do. Then what you do is make a genuine request. So I need your support in, and you would talk about the change in behaviour or attributes that you need to see. What would work better for me is, can we make a new agreement for you to, and you talk about what it is that you need to see in terms of changes in behaviour. It's a great technique, and again, is less likely to trigger those threat responses that people have when they are receiving feedback. Some other strategies to help ensure that the feedback actually sticks after the conversation is to make sure that we are measuring people's behaviour individually and also as a team on a regular basis. So there is a concept called daily huddles where you come together for about 5 minutes with your team and you go around the team and they report in on what were the 3 things that they had to do yesterday and how they'd gone. So were they done, not done, or in progress? And then what are the 3 items that they're working on today? There's no discussion where people haven't been able to do things. That can be taken offline after the huddle. The idea is to keep everyone aware of where people are in terms of what they're working on. By doing this on a regular basis, people are able to see where people are struggling and they can help support them. As a supervisor, we're able to also provide that additional support. One of the things I love, and it comes from a book called Fierce Conversations, is the concept of 365-degree feedback. And what they mean by that is every day provide feedback to your people. And that can be both positive, so acknowledging what's worked today, and also if there is any constructive feedback on just slight things that need to be changed. It is really important, if you don't like giving feedback, to make sure that you do deal with issues earlier where it is appropriate so that we can fix it while it's small rather than waiting till it gets too big. And something that I think is really important for us as supervisors is to take the time to actually seek feedback from our staff on ways that we can improve what we do. And also, maybe at the end of the feedback conversation, seeking guidance as to what could you improve in terms of even giving feedback. Some of the ways that you can support yourself in growing your feedback skills and also helping your staff members to improve how they digest feedback is to journal. So each day, if you ask yourself in your journal, what do I need to keep doing? What do I need to stop doing? And what do I need to start doing? And you consistently do that every day, you'll notice that you improve over time. And so that is a great technique for your staff as well as yourself. One of the things I know about journaling is pretty much all of the successful people journal on a daily basis. For example, Richard Branson never leaves home. The one thing he never leaves home without is his journal. So I encourage you to use journaling as a way of improving how you give feedback and also growing yourself. And here I'm reminded of a concept we often talk about, which is the 1% wins. So if each day I ask myself, what do I need to keep doing, start doing, stop doing, and I improve one thing every day, so that's about 1% win every day, I won't see massive change in the first week or two. And as the year progresses, I will see massive change because every day we're improving just that little bit. And over time, it's like compounding interest. It's an amazing thing to do. As a leader, a supervisor, or a manager, one of the things that we can really do to help our people is to ask great questions. So I encourage you to keep a list of great questions. And certainly we have resources on the Magical Learning website that can give you great questions to ask as a supervisor, and also great questions as a supervisor that you can ask to help your staff, work better, to think about what they're doing and help them perform better. One of the things that is really important to do, particularly when we are giving feedback, is to take the time to be able to breathe deeply. So when we breathe deeply, that keeps us nice and calm. So when we are giving feedback to people, if we don't breathe deeply, what will happen is we will tend to react and go to more of that fight or flight, so that threat response, rather than being nice and calm, so we can encourage the person we're giving the feedback to be calm as well. So whenever you find yourself, your brain perhaps is potentially getting a bit muddled, you're feeling that perhaps you're experiencing more emotions, put your hands on your belly and take a couple of deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. So let's just practice 3 deep breaths. So in through our nose, out through our mouth. In through our nose, out through our mouth. One last one. In through our nose and out through our mouth. Now, obviously, you wouldn't say to the staff member when you're giving them feedback, okay, let's just stop and do some deep breathing. What you would just do is gently put your hand on your belly and just consciously take those deep breaths to calm your brain. That will bring the blood flow back to your frontal cortex, and you'll be able to provide that feedback and be more curious and ask better questions than if you allow your brain to react and go into that threat mode. Another tool that is so important when we are helping to grow our people is to remain curious. So when we're curious, we are far more likely to ask great questions. And the wonderful thing about curiosity is it makes the other person feel safe. The opposite of curiosity is judgment. Now, when a person, particularly if you're giving feedback, feels judged, their shutters will go up. They will stop listening because they will feel threatened. Whereas if you ask questions, if you're genuinely curious, and often I'll lead questions with, I'm curious. So you're actually messaging them, I'm interested. I want to know what's going on for you. By doing that, that allows you to have much, much better conversations. Oops, sorry. This one I really love from my coach, Robin Sharma. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. Remember that if you're not comfortable with feedback, the first few times that you give feedback, you're probably going to be very nervous. Lean into that, practice that deep breathing, practice the curiosity, because what it will help you do is grow and become better at giving feedback. And it is an essential tool if you want to be a great leader, manager, or supervisor. Now, we've got some additional resources that can help you in terms of being able to give good feedback. For example, the first one, interesting title, it's by Shari Harley, and it's available on YouTube, and it's giving feedback, 3 funny examples of giving employee feedback. Now, the name sounds a bit weird. I highly encourage everyone to watch this particular video. She gives some really uncomfortable examples and then how to nicely give that feedback so the person feels supported and is able to adjust those particular behaviours. Another great one, which is a TED Talk, is by William Ury, The Walk from No to Yes. And some books that I love, Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. In this particular book, she gives some great case studies of real life examples where she's had to have difficult conversations with people, sometimes where they were not prepared to accept that they were part of the problem. And a great question, if someone is really pushing back against the feedback you're giving them and they're getting quite emotional, is to ask them, have you received feedback like this before? Now, what you may find is they may react to that. Give them some time to go away and digest, and then maybe do that conversation the next day and delve deep into, okay, what was that reaction about? I'm curious. Have you received this type of feedback about before? Can I support you? Or how can I support you to move forward? Another great book is Difficult Conversations. One of the things we've put together recently is a new ebook, and it's available for free download at our website, and I put the link here on the slides, 7 Secrets of Exceptional Supervisors. And this applies whether you're a supervisor, a manager or a leader. Highly encourage you to download that ebook, because not only do you get some great advice in it, but it also, you'll find some links to some videos that come with that as well. And they're only short minute and a half videos that we've done to support you in your role. Now, we've got a couple of minutes. Just want to check if anyone's got any questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. And while I'm waiting to see if there's any questions, one of the things that I found really helpful when I was giving feedback was sometimes, if it was really difficult, was to practice it with a friend first and get that person to anticipate possible reactions of the person and role play how you might address those particular issues. One other thing is sometimes you may use a word that triggers the other person. When that happens, please allow the person to process, and then remember to do your deep breathing while they're processing. Let it wash over you, and then when they've calmed down, say, I'm so sorry. I obviously used a word there that triggered something in you. Do you want to talk through that? Let's work out what's going on there. Because again, then that makes you more a person that they trust and are able to discuss, you know, what are the things that need to change and why are they reacting to the things that they're reacting to. Well, it doesn't look like we've got any other questions. So I'd love to thank you all for attending today. And please, if you have any other questions, feel free to make sure that you contact us, Learn at Magical Learning. You can also, if you want, go to our website. So have an awesome rest of the day, and we hope you enjoyed this. Next month we have a different webinar. Please feel free to enrol in that at our website, magicallearning.com, and I look forward to seeing you in another webinar. Until next time, have a great